Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurudevo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Yata Sarvani Bhutani Pratibhanti Stitani Cha Yatra Pashamam Yanti Tasmai Satyatmane Namaha. All right. So, Mark, where are we in our text?
Page 174, number 3233.
And who is going to chant this evening?
I can chant.
Thanks.
Is it 2628? Is that what he said?
Is that what you said, Mark?
3233.
3233, 174.
Page 174, correct.
Swantvadosha bhayat muktaha tirna sansara sagarah praptan uttama vishrantihi labdha labhya pashaspadaha. Be liberated from the fear of the evils of pairs of opposites. With the ocean of worldly existence passed over, unsurpassed repose won, and the unattainable supreme abode obtained.
So be liberated from the pairs of opposites. So most of us endeavor to hit all the green lights of life. That it's about wish fulfillment, getting what I want. And life isn't that way. I like to think of the sine wave. You know, it goes up and down and up and down. If you look all around life, you see that same form. Ocean, wave comes in, the wave goes out. The tide comes in, the tide comes out. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. The seasons go through their cycles. Such is life. So the yogi disengages his peace of mind from being happy when I get what I want and being unhappy when I don't have what I want. Understanding that it's the vancha, it's the wanting itself that causes the problem. Radical perpetual acceptance, I think, is the term Priya coined for herself. I love it. I just love it. Always accepting life on life's terms. Letting go, letting go. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Sharirat vyaktiriktamnyam pashyatah pravivekinah vikartitanga kasyapi nahi kinchit vikartitam. To one who is discriminating and perceiving the conscious spirit as distinct from the body, even if his limbs are cut off, nothing indeed is cut.
Yes. So the root attachment, the bija vasana, is dehovasana, my identification with the body itself. It's the most difficult to cut asunder. Keep observing the body. Keep understanding the body is an object of awareness. Now, when we're young, we take our health for granted. Not all of us. Some of us have health challenges when we're young. But it's certainly something that happens to us as we move through life. But you are not the body. If you see a pot, the pot is all beautiful, you're not a pot. If you see a pot, it's got a crack in it, you're not a pot. This is the key attachment. So if we're attached to the body and we spend an inordinate amount of time feeding it and rubbing it and taking care of it, I don't mean that we need to mortify the flesh or hate the body. It's one of the issues I have with Shankara. My feeling is it has to do with his target audience, which is probably young boys from, say, 16 to maybe 20, 25. But he really, really bangs on about how terrible the body is. I tend to take more the Buddhist method. Don't eat too much, don't eat too little. Don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Treat your body like a car. It's a vehicle. Whether you have a Volkswagen or a Maserati, doesn't matter. Change the oil, rotate the tires, keep it clean. And as a yogi, what you want to be able to do is withdraw your attention from it. We're spending a lot of time either in pampering the body or in beating the body up. We're missing the point. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Anubhuto gudasvadaho api daha vikartanaihi na shakyate nyatha kartum tattvalokatathātmanah. Jaggery which has been experienced or tasted is sweet even by burning and cutting, or even after cutting and cooking. It cannot be made otherwise. So is the perception of the truth or principle of the self. No, just as the cutting and burning of jaggery does not alter its innate sweetness, so the perception of the self is not affected by changes in the body, which is the vesture of the self.
Yes. So, what does this mean in terms of practice? In our meditation, we do our subject-object discrimination. I'm not the body, I'm not the prana, I'm not the feelings, I'm not the thoughts, I'm not the subtle ego sense. I'm the witnessing consciousness, which is like space, Chidakasha. Once you get the sense of that, I'm the eternal witness, and nothing touches me. Then, as we go through our life out there in the transactional world, keep checking out yourself. See whether this trigger affects you. Oh no, I'm still just the witness of the upset mind. See your mind angry. Oh no, I'm the witness of the anger. I'm not the anger. You're sad. Oh, I'm the witness of the sadness. Or my mind's all happy because I got what I wanted. I'm the witness of it. So we have to prove to ourselves in the laboratory of our own direct experience, nothing touches me. Don't believe it. Prove or disprove it. Laboratory of your own mind. Absolutely essential. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Parabhyasanini nari vyagrapi grihakarmani tadeva swadayatyantaha parasanga rasayanam. A woman excessively attached to another person, though intently occupied with household affairs, tastes or enjoys within only that elixir of association with that other person or paramour.
So, I think it's not just women, I think it's men too. So if you're in love, even though you're doing daily activities, think of that beloved one. So here, the scripture is saying, can you take the same kind of feeling, continue to direct it towards yourself? Now, in the beginning, that may not have sweetness to it. It may just be constant discrimination. Staying with the exercise that Ramana Maharshi gives us, Koham, who am I? Whatever experience happens, to whom did this happen? To me, who am I? Keep turning the mind back on the self. But in time, this turning of the mind back on the self has its own sweetness. This reveling in the self. Frequently through the day, remembering to remember the Lord, the sweetness of the infinite, which is myself. Again, one of my favorite of the Hebrew Psalms, taste and see the goodness of the Lord. So delicious. And if you're lucky enough to have a partner who shares this yoga with you, to be able to share it with another, it's a great inspiration. Tune up together. Share that sweetness. Next one.
एवं तत्वे परे शुद्धे धीरो विश्रान्ति स्मागतः कदे वास्वाद्यत्यन्तः वहि व्यवहारन्नपि. Thus the resolute one who has arrived at repose in the pure and highest principle, the self, tastes or enjoys within only that, though dealing in business outwardly.
Yes. So Jesus said, I have overcome the world. Oh, I love that phrase. What does that mean? The time will come when your mind abiding in the self is sweeter, deeper, pure, holier, more blissful than anything else. Then, as the force of the past drives the body into its activities in the world, they can't grab onto the mind like they used to. The phrase I use, the world becomes trinkets and baubles, pretty to look at, but nothing of real value. But this is only theory if you have no samadhi, if you have no revelry in this. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
No napekshe napekshate bhavishyat napekshate bhavishyascha vartamane na tishtati na samsmaratyati tamcha sarvameva karoti cha. He does not await or think of the future. He does not rest on or depend on the present, nor does he remember with regret the past. But he does quiet everything.
He does quite everything.
I think something is wrong in the
That
translation.
could be a typo.
It says Quiet, quiet.
Quiet. So, does that mean we don't plan anything? Oh, I can't think about going to Europe in the fall. I'm not supposed to plan. No. Swamiji would make plans. He'd schedule out where he was going to be a couple of years in advance. But your planning is done in the present. And whatever happens in the past, we don't look back. We're in the eternal now. And I love the slogan, if you want to know if God has a sense of humor, just make plans. So whatever plans we do make, always we let go, let go. But we don't have a script for the future. We don't have a script for relationships. Oh, I'm going to meet with so-and-so, and then I'm going to say, and then they're going to say, and then I'm going to say. No. the yogi trusts, uses an innate wisdom. It's appropriate to every situation. Now, the precondition to be able to live that way is you've got to give up any attachment to the result. The karma phala all belong to Krishna. They all belong. Any thoughts on this?
Jim, I've got a question. If you're sort of not there yet, do you think, for example, if you were like nervous about meeting somebody, like it's okay to sort of play in your mind what you might say, or like along those lines?
Well, what I would do would be a scientist. Why don't you give the teaching of yoga a chance? Try not planning and see what happens. Now, if it's just a date, someone you meet on Tinder or something like that, no big deal. But try it. Don't be attached. Oh, I've got to plan. I've got to script out a relationship.
Okay.
And you can always go back to the script if you want at a future time.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
So it's not about right and wrong here. It's about what will give me freedom. So my suspicion is if we're scripting out conversations, there's some sort of fear underneath. That somehow just who I am in the moment and being natural may not be lovable. I have news for you, Fang. You're very lovable.
Thanks, Jim.
Just as you are. Any other thoughts or questions? Now, antithetically, if you're doing a presentation at work, and let's say you're expecting some high-end donors to come, and they're going to be asking really, really gnarly questions about your product, I'd probably do some research so you're prepared for what they might ask. All these people are going before Congress to testify. You better believe that they run through what the possible questions are. So it all depends on the circumstance. But my invitation is don't hang on to that as a safety mechanism. Is that useful?
Yep, it is. Thanks, Jim.
All right, next one.
Bhakte bhakta samacharah shathe shatha iva sthitah balo baleshu vriddheshu vriddho dhireshu dhairyavan yuva yauvana vritteshu dukhiteshu sadukhadhi. He has the conduct of a devotee towards a devotee of God. He remains like a rogue towards a rogue. He is a child among children, an old man among old men, a courageous one among the brave, a youth among people of youthful conduct, and of sorrowful mind among the distressed.
So the woman or man of wisdom has the freedom to be a appropriate spontaneously to any situation. It doesn't mean that they're phony, doesn't mean that they're approval oriented, that they change their behavior to get other people's approval. No, they're natural and authentic all the time, but they're not stuck on some identity. Let me see if I can give you an example. I have a friend, and decades ago, he was in the special forces in the Army. And when we go out to lunch in groups and things like that, it's like he's got to present himself as former special forces guy. That's like who he is. Those stories are his identity. Those stories are the ways in which he makes social contact with people. It's really, really clear to see that's an identification. So he's always former special forces guy. Nothing else. And what yoga invites us to do is, can you let go of all stories and just see what emerges in the now? Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Api Shitaruchau Arke Sutapte Pindu Mandale Sutate Pindu Mandale Apyadha Prasarat Yagnau Vismayosya Chai Najayate. Even if the sun shines with cool light, the disk of the moon is exceedingly hot, and fire spreads downwards. Astonishment is not produced in them.
So he is or she is willing to be present to whatever circumstances life presents. So here the metaphorical things are when the sun is cool and the moon is hot. Fire doesn't go up, it goes down. But more practically speaking, are you fine when your 401k tanks? Are you fine when the other political party wins? Are you fine when the landlord evicts you? Are you fine when interest rates double? Are you okay when gas prices go through the roof? Can you be at peace and be able to be present to and adapt to whatever it is that life brings along? Some health crisis like losing one's sight or breaking a hip. Can you be in acceptance of life and life's terms? Any thoughts on this? Now, let's nuance this. This doesn't mean You walk out of your house in the morning and there's dog poop on the porch. Oh, radical acceptance, dog poop on the porch. No, clean it up. Doesn't mean we don't take actions. But let's say you have noisy upstairs neighbors. The former neighbors move out, new neighbors move in, and they're noisy. Can you accept it? Just be at peace with it. Maybe ask them to turn the stereo down after 10 o'clock. Or not. Or are you, they're so noisy. What am I going to do? I can't stand it. You get all freaked out. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Chitta spanda nirodha, the control of the movement of the mind. Chidatmana ima ittham prasarantiha shaktayah ityasyashcharya jaleshu nabhyudeti kutuhalam. These powers of the conscious self go forth or spread in this manner. Thus, curiosity does not arise in him for these marvelous illusions.
So spanda means to vibrate or to oscillate. And in the tantric traditions, they posit that the entire forms of the world of name and form is consciousness vibrating a little. The Advaitins say nothing really happens. Doesn't matter how you frame it, really. What the verse is saying is, whatever names and forms the Lord's Maya Shakti presents, can your mind be Shitala, cool? So I think he used the word Nirodha.
That's the heading of the
Yes.
chapter.
Nirodha literally means binding back. So it's not so much that, I'm going to have high beam eyeballs and grip my mind into quiescence. It isn't that at all. The way to bind back the mind is to quit believing the mind. I say this over and over again. Don't take your own thoughts or anybody else's seriously. Keep. Next one.
Yatha chalaparispandat vyaktirupta ivambhasah drishyate vartulavartah chittaspandat tatha jagat. Just as a circular whirlpool is seen as distinct from the water on account of the movement of water, so the world appears as separated from the mind by the movement of the mind.
Wonderful metaphor. So a whirlpool in water. If you're on a river and you see an eddy, and it may even have froth or get leaves in it or stuff like that, yet it's not separate from the river. So also, all the vrittis, the literal meaning of the word vritti is to turn, something gets spun. They are not different from the mind. So I invite you not to think of my mind, your mind, his mind, her mind, but think of mind, just with a capital N. Doesn't belong to anybody. And in it, this Chaitanya, this mind, all sorts of forms happen. It's nothing but you, and yet it never touches you. Just watch. Appreciate it. See it for what it is. This whole idea that it's all just mind, just Chaitanya. If we read the works of Nisargadatta Maharaj, his great, great book, I Am That, he will use the word consciousness as a translation for Chaitanya. He says it's all consciousness, various states of consciousness. And he so clearly stresses it's not my consciousness versus your consciousness. It's just the consciousness. He'll use the word awareness for the ground of being. Chit, Chaitanya. Chit, Chitta. But again, let go of the idea of my mind, your mind. It's all just mind. Any thoughts on this? Which are part
Is it like the Hiranya Garbha? You know, it's like every one conscious or mind?
Sure.
Or?
Yeah,
Okay.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Next one.
Sri Rama Vacha. Sri Rama said, Yena praspandate chittam, yena spandate thava, yena spandate thava, tat brahman bruhi me yena, chikitseyam tadevahi. Revered sage, by which does the mind throb or move rapidly, or by which does it not move? Tell me that by which I may indeed cure that very movement.
So this oscillation, this vibration, this spanda, what makes it happen? What's the cessation of it? This is what Ram asks. Let's see what Vasishtha answers.
Vasishtha Vacha. Vasishtha said, Dvau kramau chittanashaya yogo nyayam naraghava yoga tadriktirodhohi jnanam samyagavekshanam. Raghava, Rama, there are two methods for the destruction of the mind, yoga and jnana. Yoga is the restraint of the movements or the thinking process of the mind. Jnana is perceiving or knowing the truth, rightly or thoroughly.
Wonderful verse. So one of the things I love about this scripture is it gives equal weight to the path of the Raja Yogi, rooted in the Yoga Sutra, and to the Advaita Vedanta, rooted in the Upanishads. So he's riffing on the second sutra in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutra. Who remembers what it is? Okay, you know. Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. yoga is the restraining, nirodha, of the chitta from forming vrittis. In the path of yoga, you do your yamas, niyamas, you do your postures, your asana, you do your pranayama, you do your pratyahara, your sense withdrawal. You learn dharana, being able to concentrate. Meditate, and then that will mature into samadhi. The mind thunders to a stop. So those who've done pranayama, especially with all the bandhas and the energy blocks and stuff like that, you can stop the mind. The jnana yogis, the Advaita Vedantins, come to the same place through insight, through knowledge. I'm not the body, I'm not the prana, I'm not the feelings, I'm not the thoughts. I'm no idea of self. I am that partless Brahman. Not just paroksha jnana, indirect knowledge, theoretical knowledge. Aparoksha jnana, direct experience. What is this world? This world is nothing but the play of consciousness. Why take it seriously? Don't take it seriously. This will bring about the manonasha, destruction. Now, there is no reason why you can't practice an integral yoga. Swami Satchidananda, in fact, called his organization the Integral Yoga Institute. Shivananda called it his Yoga Vedanta Society. So if you are led to practice the various limbs of yoga in Raja Yoga, as well as the Vedanta, knock yourself out. It's useful. Some of us, we're austere and white. We're just pure knowledge. And you may just not want to do the Raja Yoga. You just want to be a lover of God. Let your heart take you there. Love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. That works too. Any thoughts? Too frequently in our scriptures, we'll see one school. We are the best, and now we trash all the others. And the others say, oh, no, we're the best, we trash them. But I like it that Yogavasishtha gives equal weight to yoga and jnana. Next one.
Pranadhina parispandam chittam ahu manishinah tasmin samrodhite nunam upashantam bhavet manah. Wise men call the mind as having the movement dependent on prana or vital or bioenergy. When that prana is controlled, the mind certainly becomes tranquil.
So, if you have a teacher who can teach you pranayama Some people get great benefit from it. Another valuable resource, which I think is just incredible. One of the greatest yoga teachers of the 20th century was a fellow by the name of BKS Iyengar. And he wrote several books. His first one is on yoga postures called Light on Yoga. But he also wrote a second book called Light on Pranayama, which will give you very good instruction on your own how to begin to do some pranayama. I do pranayama on occasion. Lowers my blood pressure. I don't know what you call it. What's the name of the one where you do the alternate nostril breathing?
Pranayama, Viloma.
I can't even say it. Anyway, that one. But it works. Lowers my blood pressure like that. I'll put the cuff on. It'll be running a little high. And uh-oh. Do the thing. Take it again. Drops 20 points. It's amazing. Just amazing. Anybody else do pranayama? Back in the early days, I was doing Kundalini yoga with the Yogi Bhajan people. We did the fire breath. And you did the bandhas and stuff like that. These are valuable. I think I mentioned it to another student who was having energy go through your body in a way that was disturbing, keeping her from sleeping and stuff like that. Pranayama is a good way to start to expand the nervous system's capacity to handle energy. Now, Swamiji never taught any of this stuff, but he did it. There's a story about he was doing pranayama and he was having difficulty sleeping, and then he went to see Anandamayi Ma. Can't remember the story. I think she told him to take a bite out of a chapati and put it on his head. And that worked. I don't. But this is one way to begin to control the mind. Why? When we talk about the 5 values, heirs, one of them is udana, which governs thinking. Control the prana through the control of the breath, and it will affect your mind states. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Manaspando pashantyayam samsara praviliyate suryaloka parispanda shanto yavahritih. By the cessation or quieting of the movement of the mind, this course of worldly existence is completely dissolved, just as worldly action ceases on the cessation of the throbbing or movement of sunlight.
Read it again.
By the cessation or quieting of the movement of the mind, this course of worldly existence is completely dissolved, just as worldly action ceases on the cessation of the throbbing or movement of sunlight.
Oh, I get what he's talking about. When he means people go to bed when the sun goes down. So when the sun is shining, people are active. When it's nighttime, okay, time to quit acting. So the idea here is when you can quieten the mind. What is the cause of worldly existence? It's rooted in my identification with the body. From that, I think people, places, things, and conditions make me happy or unhappy, and I get involved in the struggle the battle of life. That's samsara, cycle of worldly existence. Stop the mind and you stop the world. For the yogi, stop the mind through the pranayama. The jnani, stop the mind through insight. Going on.
Sri Rama Vacha, Sri Rama said, Pranadinam parispando vayunam rochyate katham. How is the movement of vital energies like prana controlled?
How do we control the prana? So the pranas, the main prana is divided into 5 subsidiary pranas, which are called the Panchavayu. I always have a hard time remembering. So the main prana, just called prana, that's the inhale. Apana is the exhale, or some scriptures say it's elimination. And then Vyana, that one's, is that circulation?
Yeah.
Or is that digestion?
Samana is digestion.
Vyana is circulation, Samana is digestion, Udana is thinking. Different scriptures will describe them a bit differently. So through the control of the movement of prana through the body, you can begin to control various energy centers, various states of mind. So anybody who practices any kind of Kriya Yoga, these are all visualizations of the movement of energy linked with the breath. But this is how you begin to get mastery over the energy through these various exercises. It's best to study them with a teacher who's well versed in those traditions. I am not. I'm well versed in the tradition of Vedanta. If you're drawn to that, I had this conversation. I was out to lunch with a student yesterday, and she's deeply involved in chanting. She has a chanting teacher, a guru. And for whatever particular problem, she learns these various long, extensive chants. I know nothing about it. She's very scientifically minded. She didn't think any of this stuff would work, but it's been helpful to her. My position is this: I have implicit trust in your inner guru. Trust your intuition. And if you're led to take up a practice, trust it. I'm always here. It's not mutually exclusive. Some teachers will say, oh no, if you're going to work with me, you can't work with anybody else. You can't do with other stuff. And that's some nonsense. Go where you get help. Any thoughts on this? All right, let's see how, again, this is an abridgment. So I have no idea what specific practices have been left out of this abridgment. But let's see what the next verse says.
Vasishtha Vacha, Vasishtha said, Shastra Sajjana Samparka Vairagyabhyasa Yogatah Ekatattva Ghanabhyasa Pranaspando Nirudhyate. The movement of prana is controlled by means of study and practice the teachings of the scriptures, association with virtuous people, absence of worldly desires, the practice of spiritual discipline, and by the constant or uninterrupted practice of the one truth principle.
Yes. So here he gives us very good advice. I do not know which specific scriptures will give you instruction in pranayama. I'm sure there are commentaries, ancillary works on Yoga Sutra. Yoga Sutra will fit on one page. It's actually very short. Again, the one book that I really believe in, because he's just a master of this stuff, is the BKSIN book. So if you're called to this, find a teacher who knows about it. But then he gives us some other exercises which are of value. So after the practices that are in the scriptures, I think the next one was association with the wise. Was that what he said?
Yeah, virtuous people.
Association with virtuous people. In the Buddhist traditions, you've got the three refuges. You take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma. What's the third one? The Sangha. In other words, hang out with fellow travelers. Towards the end of his life, Ram Dass said something that was so beautiful. He had such the soul of a poet. Someone once asked him, why are we here? And he said, to walk one another home. Oh, isn't that wonderful? That's why we're here. You take my arm, I'll take yours. Together we walk towards the infinite. Doesn't mean to hang out with goodies. It means to hang out with yogis. These are the virtuous people. Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, environment is stronger than will. If you're hitting the bars every night, spending your time hooking up on the apps, and the rest of the time you're at work, going through your phone, you might have the personal discipline to have a strong spiritual practice. But it sure is easier if you have a Sangha. What's the next idea he said?
Absence of worldly desires.
Yes. So, this idea of letting go of the world, vairagya. Shankar describes it, that desire, meaning we don't do it overnight, to give up attachment to all enjoyments gained through the senses and all notions of a personal sense of self, from the body up to Brahma, the creator. How do we do it? Always through viveka. Discrimination brings about clear detachment. I was talking with a woman Friday, and she's in pretty deep trouble. She's been drinking a lot of vodka every day, and she's nervous, and her marriage is falling apart, and her kids have rejected her. She doesn't work. She has no friends. She feels like she's invisible. And her mind is telling her, I have all these problems. If you had my problems, you'd drink too. What I was suggesting to her is it possible that the drinking is what's causing all these problems? I don't think she believes it yet. But it's the same thing for us. Is it possible that you're unhappy not because the world isn't behaving, but you are stuck wanting, that we have an addictive relationship with the world? More, better, different, more, better, different. Gimme, 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 gimme. Control issues. Nobody's behaving. I'm just so annoyed and angry because everything is wrong. It's not the way I want it. And yoga says, maybe you might try taking up vairagya. So mature vairagya comes through insight, which is the fruit of discrimination. It is rarely effective if done out of willpower. I'm just not going to do this anymore. You find yourself going out. We have to see that what I was doing is what was causing my misery. And that can take lifetimes to figure out. Is that the last of the ideas in that verse? Is there one more?
Practice of spiritual disciplines and constant practice of the one truth principle.
Yes. So various disciplines that we do, there's so many that help to purify the head and the heart. And the one truth principle, Aham Brahmasmi, I am that partners Brahman. What is this world? Brahma Satyam Jagamithya. Brahman alone is real. The names and forms of this world are illusion. That's the one truth. Next one.
Avasanat manodhyanat asamsprishta vikalpatah purakadya nilayamat omkaroscharane va guruktanyakramat vapi pranaspando nirudhyate. By the absence of mental impressions, by the meditation of the mind, by being untouched by doubts, by the control of breath through inhalation and the like, or by the utterance of the sacred syllable Om, or else by other methods described by the Guru, the movement of prana or vital energy is controlled.
So here's a list of possible practices. It's a partial list. Let's look at it one by one. First idea.
Absence of mental impressions.
Yes. So this is getting rid of our vasanas. A vasana is an impression left in the unconscious as the result of my past egoism. My I-ness and minus dance with the world. Remember, a vasana has two powers, veiling power and projecting power. Varana Shakti, Vikshepa Shakti. So, how do I get free from vasana? For us Advaitins, as jnana yogis, if I feel like a person, I'm deluded, drop it. Who am I? Cool. Practice, not letting the mind extrovert into the world. All of yoga can be said to be various forms for vipassana purgation. Next idea.
By the meditation of the mind.
Just coming to satsang won't do it. Just reading the scriptures won't do it. We have to have a meditative practice. 20 minutes a day is a minimum. Now, once you're facile, and you can drop in, you can do this throughout the day, just moments of just many, many times through the day. In the end, depth is more important than length. You need to have a meditative practice. Next idea.
By being untouched by doubts.
Yes. So, in the beginning, bang the teacher with your questions. Swamiji used to say the teacher's like a bell. You have to bang it with your questions in order to get your doubts resolved. Later on, we begin to see that the doubting mind itself can be let go of. What I find so interesting, people will arrive, they'll have all these questions, all these doubts, and we don't answer their doubts, but they drop their minds. The doubts go away. How do I know when I need to keep doing practice? As long as the mind throws up doubts. That's the mark of my ignorance. I still have doubts. Next idea.
By the control of breath through inhalation and the like.
Yes. Here he's referring to the whole science and practice of pranayama, which we've talked about earlier. Another effective practice. Next one.
Or by the utterance of the sacred syllable Om.
And here, Om is meaning here a catch-all for the entire science of mantra. Not just chanting Om, but all the various mantras. And again, it's an entire science. I don't know hardly anything about it. So you'll have to find someone else who can instruct you in that. But it is powerful and effective in helping to clean out the psyche and to quieten the mind. It's pretty simple. I was given one mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, and that served me very well. One mantra. Next one.
Or else by other methods.
Other methods. All right. I think this is a good place to stop. What verse are we on for next week?
50.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om. So we do have one person in our Sangha who's quite knowledgeable on the Raja Yoga tradition, and that's Kali Om in Chicago. But she is doing online classes. She's actually currently here in Sevastopol. She came to visit yesterday. But if you want to learn about some of this stuff, I think is she on the WhatsApp group?
Yes.
Yeah. And Deepa, if you have interest in mantra chanting, she's our go-to gal there. And but you'll find the resources that you need if you have an interest. All right. Hari Om. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tim.